Welcome to Session 3 of Professional Development. Content, Organization, Delivery. Last week our goal was to gather content, and this week we're going to focus on organization. So this week is all about organizing your information, and in the most simple sense, we're going to organize our information eventually when we talk about craft in the introductions, bodies, and conclusions. But thinking like this is more useful when we begin talking about the delivery of information in a session. But today we're going to talk about organizing the body of our information. How can we arrange the message of our session so that it can have the greatest possible impact? And there's a multitude of options for organization. And that's what we're going to focus on in this video. Remember, we use these in order to organize complex information in a way that helps us with our purpose. There's a quote I kind of broke apart here, but we want to tell the audience what we're going to say in the introduction. We're going to say it all in the body, and then we're going to say it again in the conclusion. I think it was Dale Carnegie. So in the intro is our preview and our setup. Our body is our substance and our details, and our conclusion will bring it all back around in summary. So today we're going to have a couple different purposes. The first is to analyze our audience's purpose, right? There are numerous purposes for presenting information. Most presentations have one of these purposes, but it turns out in the professional world, especially with PD, rather than thinking about these as formats or formulas, informative, inspirational, persuasive, demonstrative, we have to think of them as tools that we're going to have to combine in each of these things as we create our presentation. So we know that an informative presentation provides new information accurately, and it does it in a simple and straightforward way. We know an inspirational message is delivered with the purpose of captivating an audience while delivering a certain core message. We know a persuasive type of conversation convinces an audience in favor of a central argument. And we also know that demonstrative is a step-by-step guide. But we also know that when we're developing professional development, we have to pull on each of these as tools in order to have an effective session. But in order to use those tools, we need to organize the information we have collected using patterns. And the patterns we're going to talk about today have to do with the body of our session. So not the introduction, not the conclusion. We're going to work more on those next week. But we're going to use these patterns and test out using the information we collected to see which way best fits our story we want to tell in our session. So the first organizational pattern I want to talk about is a little bit more niche, and it's a spatial pattern. It involves spatial organization. So it involves arranging the main points that we've collected in our research according to how they fit together. It's usually their relationship to one another or their physical location. So I'm going to give you some examples. Examples of presentations that would benefit from a spatial organizational pattern is if you are going to inform audiences, explaining how the brain absorbs or interprets or processes information. Describing how to navigate different parts of a digital program might be a good way to use this type of organization for your information. If you did a session on building your classroom's physical spaces with purpose, this could be your organizational method. It turns out if you found your brain making a diagram during your information collection phase last week, maybe this is the method you use to organize your information. Chronological is another way that you could organize your information. A chronological pattern arranges your main points sequentially according to when they happen in time. So if you're presenting information involving the historical sequence of information, this is what I might use. So an example of this, for instance, if I was going to walk a new administrator through a building's history with reading interventions over the last 6 years, this may be a perfect organizational method. I might say, hey, 5 years ago we did this. 4 years ago we did this. We changed it 3 years ago to do this. This model is best suitable for historical, timeline, or process procedure topics that can be split into different segments according to time sequence. Another good example for this is if you were training stakeholders on like the IEP referral process, that might be a good example, and the different dates and timelines and checklists that were involved in that. If you sequenced out your session as a timeline, that might be how you would organize your information in this. So if you found your brain making a timeline during your information collection phase, maybe this is the organizational method for your main ideas. Method number 3 is compare contrast. This pattern involves organizing information depending on how two or more things are related or different from one another. This organizational method works really well in a situation where your audience can better understand a particular topic when it's discussed in a relationship to another topic. So when you're talking about strengths, weaknesses, other factors, when they're compared side by side, either whole by whole, so big part to big part, or you break them down into different parts. An example, I might use this method if I was talking to secondary teachers about reading interventions, and I was comparing the value of phonemic interventions versus morphemic interventions, because there's kind of a flip when you get into the middle school grade bands. So you may use this when you're comparing systems too. So we might do this if we were doing a presentation on SIS versus however you do this function in Teacherese. If you found your brain making a Venn diagram during your information collection phase last session, maybe this is the organizational method for you. All right, method number 4 is sequential pattern. A sequential pattern involves organizing information in a particular order over a given period. But rather than a chronological pattern, this sequential information is arranged systematically in a step-by-step sequence that essentially describes a particular process. So your main section that you have is further divided into subsections, representing each primary step, while its subsections represent the substep that the target audience will follow in the real-life application of whatever you're describing. So an example of this could be how to develop professional development. So I would say, first we're going to have an idea, then we will research content. Afterwards, we're going to organize the information for your purpose and your audience. Then we're going to sprinkle some delivery skills into our sessions. And that pattern is best suitable for ideas that describe a process that occurs in a series of sequential steps. So if you find your brain making a flowchart during your information collection phase, maybe this is an organizational method you might try out. Method number 5, problem, methods, solutions. Also called sometimes like a need plan. This pattern arranges your main points into a problem solution format. Usually the perceived problem you're trying to solve is your main idea, and the points that follow that suggest possible solutions. So in this type of organizational pattern, you're going to describe the causes and effects of a problem with very high clarity, and then you're going to point out a solution that either controls or eliminates the effects. Problem solutions methods, an example, let's see. You present your information when you do this by discussing the nature of the problem, and then you discuss the solution. So you may have a problem of increased office referrals, maybe. If you have a bunch of office referrals, you may present a strategy or a protocol to reduce that problem, and then you demonstrate why that solution might best support that problem. This pattern is probably the best when your aim is to convince and compel your audience to take a specific solution. It kind of lets you cheat the theory into your presentation, but downside, it can also sometimes feel like a sales pitch. If you found that your brain kept on trying to solve a specific problem during your information collection phase, this might be an organizational method you try out with your information. General to specific, or I call it hierarchical. This method shows the big picture first and then adds the details afterwards. So sometimes that's done with an order of importance, placing items from most to least or from largest idea to smallest idea. General specific example, let's see. I might start with the concept of MTSS, and I may tell you each of the ingredients you need to make that happen, going through the amount and time for implementing each of those ingredients more specifically. If you find yourself organizing your information in a hierarchical manner, like the pyramid from Maslow's needs, then this may be the organizational method for you. Number 7, we have cause and effect. This one starts with the causes and speculates effects. So this pattern is probably best suitable for presentations in which you advocate your audience to take action that will result in a solution to a problem. So it kind of mixes compare, contrast, problem, solution all together. In this pattern, information is arranged to show the reasons why something happened for the effects of something. Example, we often use this when we show off our data. We say good or, if it's good or bad, right? I did this thing, then this thing happened. Or I tried this intervention and my benchmark data went up like this. Or we didn't implement this idea with fidelity and our data looks like this because of it. So if you find yourself focusing your thinking around a single best practice, that you have evidence for causing specific outcomes, you may think to organize your information like that. And then the most common, although convoluted, organizational method is probably topical. This is common. It organizes your information in a presentation that allows us to organize or arrange the main points of our presentation when it doesn't fit neatly into any other organizational patterns, right? It lets us organize information in a way that is effective and makes sense with our overall goal. So it's not arranged chronologically, our information isn't broken down regionally, it breaks it down into a problem that can be fixed. It simply categorizes the various items in a logical way that we can have further discussion about. So you take this broad topic and you subdivide it into smaller topics that support your main idea. Example, I might talk about the concept of functional skills as a main idea, and then I might go on to discuss in a presentation different topics within that, such as what are functional skills and activities you can do to support functional skills in the classroom. Sometimes this organizational method can feel disjointed, especially if your information has a more natural way of organizing itself that matches one of the ones we've talked about previously. So if you find yourself making like a brain map with your information, or a mind map during your collection phase, this might be the organizational method for you. A lot of times topical are ones that you settle on because other ones don't fit, but oftentimes they show off that idea might be too big for a single small session. All right, homework. I know this is a lot, but this will be a simple process. What I want you to do is I want you to look over the main ideas and subpoints that you had collected. You may have to do a little bit more research if you find yourself with a lot of empty dead ends as you were going through your gathering of information. But I want you to test out the idea you've been chasing by organizing your information in different ways. We're going to do this as a method of searching for which one best fits your idea. So every idea, every presentation has an organizational method that will tell its story the best. And I want you to take your main ideas and the subtopics that go with it, and I want you to try organizing them using 3 different organizational patterns that we talked about. So I'm going to give you an example with the concept I talked about last week, vocabulary. So I could choose, looking at all the information I gathered here, to organize this information in a problem solution way. So maybe I talk about student talk, and student talk is my problem, right? Man, I wish more students use these words in order for them to have better talk in the classroom about concepts we're introducing. My solution to that problem is to focus on vocabulary, and that is the way I'd present my information. So I could do that, and that may work for a specific purpose, or I might use sequential patterns. So I might say, listen, in order to have good vocabulary instruction, you're going to pick a word, you're going to introduce a word, you're going to play with the word, and I might show off my idea of vocabulary acquisition like that. Or I might even do chronological, right? We've been trying XYZ for interventions. Why don't we try this with vocabulary, right? However, I think my idea is going to be packaged the most clearly. for its purpose in a session is what I want to stumble upon when I go through this. So I want you to ask yourself which fits your idea best. All right. And then I want you to reflect on the organizational methods. I want you to pick one out of the 3 or 4 that you tested out, and I want you to reflect on why that one matches the purpose of your session. Do you think it'll fit well with your audience? Do you think it fits your idea? Does it give focus to the right things with the information that you collected? So, while knowing about these different types of organizational patterns is helpful, and it's going to provide cohesive clarity to the information that you collected and that we're going to present, we also need more than just good information organized well in order to create a good quality PD session. We need to be able to deliver that information in a way that will catch our stakeholders. So next week, we are going to talk about purpose and content, and we're going to combine those with our skeleton of organization in order to create a session that fits our goals and our stakeholders and adds a little bit more allegory and personality. Looking forward to it.